Here is something that almost no veterinarian takes the time to explain when they hand you a prescription and send you home. Your dog's paws are the only place on their entire body where moisture actually pushes through the skin surface. Every other part of your dog, their back, their sides, their belly, the skin holds moisture in. But the paw pads are lined with eccrine sweat glands, the same type of sweat glands that cover the entire human body. The critical difference is that your dog only has them in one location, their feet. This single biological fact explains why paw inflammation is so stubborn, why it explodes during allergy season, why the medicated sprays and creams you have been buying work for 3 days and then stop completely, and why something as inexpensive as a 5-minute Epsom salt soak can reduce visible inflammation, draw bacterial debris out of the tissue, and give many dogs noticeable relief within the first day or two. I have been recommending this in my clinic for years. Owners always look at me with the same expression, slightly skeptical, quietly hoping, and then they come back 2 weeks later and tell me their dog slept through the entire night without chewing their feet for the first time in months. Today, I am going to explain exactly why this remedy works on a biological level, how to do it with the correct dilution and water temperature. The single most important step at the end that almost every owner skips entirely, and why treating only the outside while ignoring what is happening on the inside will bring those inflamed paws back within weeks. Because surface relief and permanent relief are two very different things, and understanding the difference will change how you manage your dog's health from this point forward. Hi everyone, I am Dr. Michael Carter, your neighborhood veterinarian, and welcome back to the channel. If your dog is dealing with red, raw, inflamed paws right now, you are in exactly the right place. Today we are doing a complete masterclass on canine paw inflammation, the biology behind it, the most underrated home remedy in veterinary care, and the long-term prevention plan that addresses this at the root. Grab something to write with. Let's get into it. To understand why Epsom salt works the way it does, we first need to understand what is actually happening inside your dog's paw. And I promise once you see this, the solution will make complete biological sense. Your dog's paw pad is one of the most specialized structures in the entire canine body. It has a thick keratinized outer layer for durability, a dense layer of fat underneath for cushioning, and embedded deep within the pad tissue are those eccrine sweat glands we talked about. When your dog steps outside onto grass, concrete, or any surface, those glands are continuously releasing a small amount of moisture onto the pad surface. This moisture is what gives your dog traction and helps keep the pad pliable. But here is where the problem begins. Because that moisture is always present on the surface of the paw pads act almost like a collection zone for everything your dog walks through. Pollen from grass, mold spores from damp soil, fertilizer residue, dust mites, road salt, all of it adheres directly to the moist surface of the paw and sits against the skin in the warm, enclosed spaces between the toes. The immune system detects those foreign particles. It sends inflammatory cells flooding into the area. The paw becomes warm, red, and intensely uncomfortable. Your dog licks. Their saliva adds moisture and bacteria to tissue that is already compromised. The warm, wet environment between the toes becomes the perfect breeding ground for bacteria and yeast to multiply rapidly, and the cycle feeds itself, getting worse every single week. This is why topical sprays fail. They address the surface of the skin, but they cannot reach the inflammatory activity inside the tissue. They mask the sensation of itching while the root process continues underneath. This is exactly where Epsom salt does something that no spray bottle can replicate. And I want to explain the science carefully here because this is the part that most pet content never actually covers. Epsom salt is not a salt in the traditional sense. The full chemical name is magnesium sulfate. It is a naturally occurring mineral compound made of two specific elements, magnesium and sulfate. And when you dissolve it in warm water and submerge your dog's inflamed paw, three distinct biological processes begin simultaneously. The first is osmosis. Think of this the way you think of a dry sponge pressed against a saturated surface. The sponge draws the moisture through. Magnesium sulfate creates a similar effect on inflamed tissue. When tissue is inflamed, it swells because excess fluid rushes into the area as part of the immune response. That trapped fluid is what creates the heat, the pressure, and the intense discomfort your dog feels. The dissolved magnesium sulfate in the water has a higher osmotic concentration than the fluid sitting inside the swollen tissue. This causes the excess fluid to move outward through the skin, drawn toward the higher concentration solution in the bowl. The swelling begins to reduce. The pressure on the nerve endings decreases. The sensation of burning and itching begins to calm. The second mechanism is the anti-inflammatory action of magnesium itself. Magnesium is one of the most essential minerals in the canine body. It is involved in regulating hundreds of enzymatic functions, including the pathways that control the inflammatory response. When magnesium is absorbed transdermally, meaning through the skin during a soak, it has a measurable inhibitory effect on the pro-inflammatory compounds that have accumulated in the tissue. In simple terms, it tells the immune system's local response to stand down. It quiets the alarm that has been ringing continuously in your dog's paw tissue. The third mechanism is the sulfate component. Sulfate supports the body's natural detoxification processes at the cellular level. It assists in clearing the bacterial metabolites and inflammatory byproducts that have accumulated in the paw tissue after days or weeks of constant irritation. It helps the skin clear its own internal debris. So what you are running with a 5-minute Epsom salt soak is 3 simultaneous actions: drawing out the excess fluid that causes swelling, delivering magnesium into the inflamed tissue to suppress the inflammatory response, and supporting the clearance of bacterial and inflammatory waste from the area. That is why results are visible so quickly, not because it is magic, because the chemistry is genuinely working. Now let me walk you through exactly how to do this correctly, because the details matter and getting them wrong will produce poor results or cause additional irritation. The dilution ratio is the first thing to get right. The correct amount is 1 tablespoon of plain Epsom salt for every quart of water. If you are using a large tub that holds a gallon of water, that means 4 tablespoons. Do not exceed this concentration. A more concentrated solution creates stronger osmotic pull, which sounds better but is not. Too much Epsom salt will strip moisture from the paw pads after the soak, leaving them dry and prone to cracking. Use the exact ratio. The Epsom salt must be plain and unscented. No lavender added, no eucalyptus, no essential oil blends, nothing with fragrance. Scented Epsom salt products are marketed beautifully, but many essential oils are toxic to dogs either through skin absorption or through ingestion when your dog licks their paws after the soak. Plain white mineral Epsom salt only. That is the one condition that is not negotiable. Water temperature is critical. The target is lukewarm, the temperature you would use for a very young child's bath. Comfortably warm to the touch, not hot, not cold. Hot water is the specific thing you must avoid. Heat dilates blood vessels and draws additional inflammatory blood flow to the surface of the skin. If you use hot water on an inflamed paw, you will make the redness and swelling measurably worse in the hours after the soak. Lukewarm water opens the tissue enough for the magnesium sulfate to interact with the skin without triggering additional vascular inflammation. Use a container deep enough to fully submerge your dog's paws past the ankle. A large mixing bowl or small plastic tub works perfectly. Dissolve the Epsom salt fully in the lukewarm water until the solution is clear. Place your dog's paws in the container and allow them to soak for 5 minutes. If your dog is restless, place a silicone lick mat with a thin layer of plain, unsweetened yogurt in front of them to hold their focus during the soak. Just read the ingredients on the yogurt label before you use it. You are checking for one ingredient, xylitol, which is an artificial sweetener sometimes listed as birch sugar. Even a small amount of xylitol causes rapid and severe liver failure in dogs. The yogurt must contain absolutely no artificial sweeteners of any kind. 5 minutes is the correct soak duration. Longer than 10 minutes begins to over-soften the paw pads, which makes them more vulnerable to cracking and injury during their next walk. 5 to 10 minutes is the therapeutic window. Stay within it. And now I need to tell you about the step that determines whether this entire process actually works. The step most owners skip: drying. After you remove your dog's paws from the soak, you must dry every space between the toes completely, thoroughly. Leave no moisture behind. Here is the biology of why this is non-negotiable. Yeast and bacteria cannot establish themselves on dry skin. The two conditions they absolutely require to survive and multiply are warmth and moisture. If you soak your dog's paws and allow them to air dry, or simply blot the tops of the feet and call it done, you have just created the ideal conditions for bacterial and yeast growth to immediately resume. Take a clean, dry towel and gently work between each toe, every single space. If your dog tolerates it, use a hairdryer on the cool or low warm setting held at a safe distance to ensure the interdigital skin is fully dry. It takes an additional 2 minutes, and it is the difference between the soak being genuinely therapeutic and the soak making the underlying problem worse. Do this once daily for 7 consecutive days. Many owners report a visible reduction in redness around day 3 and noticeably less nighttime licking by day 5 to 7. For maintenance, 2 to 3 soaks per week after that initial week is appropriate. Please keep this professional warning clearly in mind. Epsom salt soaks are effective for surface inflammation, contact dermatitis from environmental allergens, mild bacterial irritation on intact skin, and interdigital inflammation in its early stages. Veterinarians routinely recommend Epsom salt soaks for interdigital furuncles, those painful lumps that form between the toes, as part of a supported home care protocol. However, if your dog's paws show open wounds that are bleeding or weeping, deep punctures, or thick, dark discharge with a foul smell, those signs indicate a deep tissue infection that requires prescription antibiotics or antifungal medication. The soak will not be sufficient, and delaying appropriate veterinary care at that stage will allow the infection to spread. Additionally, Epsom salt must never be ingested. Magnesium sulfate in significant quantities causes severe diarrhea, and in large enough amounts can dangerously alter blood pressure and heart rate. After every soak, rinse the paws briefly with clean water to remove residual salt from the surface and dry thoroughly. This eliminates any salt residue before your dog begins self-grooming. We have handled the outside, the swelling is coming down, the overnight licking is stopping, the paws are beginning to heal. But here is the conversation I need to have with you now, because if we stop at the surface, you will be doing Epsom salt soaks every month for the rest of your dog's life without ever getting ahead of it. Chronic paw inflammation that returns season after season or that never fully clears is telling you something important. It is telling you that the immune system is overreacting. And the reason the immune system is overreacting almost always originates in the gut. 70 to 80% of your dog's entire immune system is housed inside the gastrointestinal tract. Inside a healthy gut, trillions of beneficial bacteria act as regulators. They train the immune system, teach it to distinguish between a real threat and a harmless particle, and keep inflammatory responses calibrated and proportionate. But here is the problem with modern commercial kibble. Dry dog food is extruded at extremely high temperatures during manufacturing to produce a shelf-stable product with an 18-month expiration date. That high heat process kills virtually all living bacteria in the food. Day after day of eating a sterile, heavily processed diet starves the gut microbiome. As the population of beneficial bacteria declines, the immune system loses its calibration. What was once a low-level exposure to grass pollen on the paw pads now triggers a massive, disproportionate inflammatory response. The body cannot distinguish between a real pathogen and a harmless allergen anymore. Everything becomes a fire alarm. The paws bear the visible result of that systemic immune dysregulation. Here is how you address it from the inside. First, introduce live probiotic bacteria back into your dog's gut. The most straightforward and affordable way is to add 1 tablespoon of plain, unsweetened kefir to their food each day. Kefir is a fermented dairy product containing millions of live, beneficial bacterial cultures. These cultures begin recolonizing the gut microbiome within days of daily use. As the gut population rebuilds, the immune system's calibration begins to normalize. The inflammatory response to environmental allergens becomes measured rather than extreme. The label must say plain, unflavored, with no artificial sweeteners, no vanilla, no fruit. Check for xylitol every single time. If your dog happens to be lactose intolerant, a high-quality canine-specific probiotic powder from your vet achieves exactly the same result. Second, add fresh omega-3 fatty acids to their daily bowl. Standard dry kibble has a heavily skewed ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-6 fatty acids are pro-inflammatory. They were necessary in the original formulation of commercial food, but the ratio is wrong for a body dealing with chronic inflammation. 2 pumps of refrigerated, pure salmon oil over their kibble each day provide the omega-3s that biologically suppress the inflammatory signaling pathways in the body. Refrigerated and kept in an airtight bottle is important. Omega-3s oxidize and become biologically inactive when exposed to air and warmth. If your dog rejects fish oil, 2 whole sardines packed in water with no added salt mixed into their food twice weekly provides an equivalent omega-3 dose. Third, look carefully at the first 3 ingredients on your dog's current food label. If you see corn, wheat, white rice, soy, tapioca, or potato listed among the first 3 ingredients, that food is heavy in starches that convert rapidly to glucose during digestion. Glucose is the primary food source for yeast. A high-starch kibble diet continuously fuels yeast internally, which shows up externally in the ears and skin folds and consistently between the toes. Transitioning gradually to a food where a named animal protein is the first ingredient and where starchy carbohydrates are minimized removes the internal fuel source that feeds the yeast attacking the paw surface. The transition must be gradual over 10 to 14 days, mixing the new food incrementally with the old to avoid gastrointestinal upset. Here is the complete action plan so you can begin tonight. First, pick up plain unscented Epsom salt from any pharmacy. Dissolve 1 tablespoon per quart of lukewarm water. Soak your dog's paws for 5 minutes. After the soak, rinse briefly with clean water and dry every space between the toes completely. Do this once daily for 7 days. Beginning tomorrow morning, add 1 tablespoon of plain unsweetened kefir to their food. No xylitol, no artificial sweeteners. Read the label. This week, purchase refrigerated pure salmon oil and add 2 pumps to each meal. Over the next 2 weeks, check the first 3 ingredients on their current kibble and begin a gradual transition if the first ingredients are starches rather than protein. Within 7 days of the daily soaks, look for 3 changes. The redness between the toes should be visibly reduced. The nighttime licking should be decreasing. The corn chip odor that comes from yeast activity should be fading. If the paws show no improvement or worsen within 3 days of daily soaking, please stop the home treatment and schedule a veterinary appointment. That is the signal that a deeper infection is present that requires professional diagnosis and targeted treatment. I have to say something to the dog owners who have been managing this for months, the ones who have tried every spray, every cream, every recommendation, and are exhausted from watching their dog be uncomfortable. You are not doing anything wrong. You have been given surface solutions for a systemic problem. Your dog's immune system is not broken. It is just running without the gut infrastructure it needs to regulate itself properly. You can restore that infrastructure. It takes consistency in a few weeks, but the biology will respond. Every night your dog sleeps through without chewing their feet is proof that the approach is working, and they deserve those nights. If this masterclass gave you clarity and a real starting point, please do me a favor and hit the like button on your way out. It genuinely helps this channel reach other dog owners who are searching for answers right now. Subscribe so you never miss a new video. And leave a comment below. I want to know what you have tried for your dog's paws before today and whether you have ever used an Epsom salt soak. Tell me your experience. I read as many of them as I can. Give your dog a long, gentle scratch right behind the ears from me tonight. You are doing an incredible job for them. Stay consistent, trust the process, and I will see you in the very next video.